If two people make the same salary, most people assume their financial lives should look at least somewhat similar, not identical, but close enough. They live in the same city, shop at the same stores, pay the same inflated prices, and complain about the same economy. So when one person seems calm and stable while the other feels permanently behind, the usual explanation shows up immediately. One of them must just be better with money. That explanation feels simple, clean, and satisfying. It is also incomplete. Because in real life, the same salary rarely creates the same financial conditions. The number may be identical on a paycheck, but the life built underneath that number can be completely different. And once you understand why, a lot of modern money stress starts to look less like a personality flaw and more like a structural problem. That distinction matters. A lot of people spend years blaming themselves for being bad with money when what they are actually experiencing is a much harder version of the same income. That is the first idea to understand. Most people compare income at the top line. Life is decided much lower than that. Salary sounds powerful because it arrives as a single clean number. It looks objective. It looks comparable. It feels like a fair measurement. But most people do not actually live on their salary. They live on what survives after fixed pressure. And fixed pressure is where two similar incomes start turning into different lives. Imagine two people each earning $4,000 a month. On paper, they look comparable. In practice, one person is paying $900 for rent in a shared situation, has no car payment, and works close enough to get to work cheaply. The other is paying $1,600 for housing, still carrying a car note from a decision made 2 years ago, and loses money every week just to keep showing up to work. Nothing dramatic has happened yet. No shopping mistake, no luxury spending, no irresponsible splurge. The difference started before either person made a choice this month. That is what makes this so important. People often talk about spending habits as if financial outcomes begin at the point of purchase. But for a huge number of adults, the month is already shaped before they buy anything optional. Rent has already taken its cut. Debt has already taken its cut. Transportation has already taken its cut. Insurance, minimum payments, subscriptions. They forgot to cancel months ago, family obligations, medication, and old emergencies that never fully left the system are already waiting. By the time the paycheck feels available, much of it is no longer free. This is why the phrase same salary can be misleading. It describes incoming money. It tells you almost nothing about usable money. And usable money is what actually determines how someone lives. Usable money decides whether a small problem stays small. Usable money decides whether you can replace something without panic, say no to a bad deal, wait for a discount, or make one mistake without carrying it into next month. This is why some incomes look reasonable from the outside but feel suffocating from the inside. The issue is not always that the number is low. Sometimes the number is simply carrying too much weight. The second reason identical salaries produce different lives is timing. Most people think money problems are mainly about amount, but daily financial stress is often about sequence. The order in which money enters and leaves your life can completely change how stable that life feels. Two people can earn the same monthly amount and still experience the month very differently depending on when the pressure arrives. If most of your major bills hit within the first week, your salary may technically be enough, but your life will still feel like it is constantly under attack. If your rent, loan payment, credit card balance, and insurance all clear before the middle of the month. The remaining weeks are not being lived with the same emotional conditions as someone whose obligations are more spread out. That difference is easy to underestimate because the math still looks similar by the end of the month. The stress does not. One person feels like the month opens with breathing room. The other feels like the month opens with damage control. And once financial life becomes damage control, expensive decisions start showing up everywhere. Not because people suddenly become careless, because urgency changes the price of everything. When you can wait, the market gives you options. You can compare prices, skip a bad offer, postpone a purchase, or survive a small inconvenience until a better solution appears. When you cannot wait, those options disappear. A broken phone before payday becomes whatever replacement is available now. A car issue on a workday becomes the first repair quote you can get. A late bill becomes a fee, and the fee makes next month tighter before next month even begins. That is how timing quietly taxes people who are already under pressure. The third difference is recovery speed. This may be the most important one. Financial stability is not just about whether you can absorb a problem. It is about how quickly your system returns to normal after the problem happens. That sounds small, but it separates entire lives. In one household, an unexpected expense is frustrating, but it stays inside the current month. In another, the same expense creates a balance, the balance creates interest, the interest reduces next month's flexibility, and the reduced flexibility makes the next emergency more expensive when it arrives. That is not just a money problem, that is a recovery problem. And recovery problems are brutal because they make the past keep charging the future. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of being financially behind. People often imagine that money struggles come from big dramatic failures. Sometimes they do, but a lot of the time, the real damage comes from small problems that never fully reset. A bad week in March is still visible in May. A rushed decision from last winter is still sitting inside this summer's budget. An old financing choice keeps narrowing today's options. Once that starts happening, two people with the same salary are no longer living in the same present. One is spending current income. The other is spending current income while dragging older versions of themselves behind it. That is a very different life. The fourth reason the same salary produces different outcomes is psychological, but it is still economic. Money decisions are not made in a vacuum. They are made in a mental environment. A person with margin usually makes cleaner decisions for a simple reason. They are not making those decisions under threat. They have time to think. They can delay a purchase for a week. They can compare 3 options instead of taking the first one. They can ignore a fake sale. They can survive inconvenience without paying to escape it. That is not just discipline. It is decision quality supported by better conditions. When someone is tired, behind, overstretched, and already worried about the rest of the month, the decision itself changes. They are not choosing between a good option and a bad option. They are often choosing between relief now and a problem later. That is why financially stressed people often pay more for speed, convenience, and certainty. From the outside, that can look irrational. From the inside, it can be the only move that fits the moment. This is where a lot of financial advice quietly fails. It talks as if every dollar is making choices under equal conditions. It assumes every person comparing prices has the same time, the same energy, the same flexibility, and the same ability to delay a decision without consequences. That is not how real adults live. Two people with the same salary are often buying from completely different levels of pressure. And pressure changes price. It changes what feels possible. It changes what feels worth the effort. It changes how often someone ends up paying the just get through this week version of a decision. That is why the same income can produce very different financial reputations. One person looks organized, strategic, and good with money. Another looks reactive, inconsistent, and always a little behind. But sometimes what you are really looking at is not character, it is friction. It is not that one person is morally superior. It is that one person's financial life contains fewer traps. This is also why comparing yourself to people with the same salary can be so psychologically dangerous. The comparison feels fair, it almost never is. You see the same income and assume the same starting point. But the starting point is rarely the paycheck itself. The starting point is the structure already attached to it. How expensive is the housing? How much of the income is pre-committed? How fragile is the month if one thing goes wrong? How fast can a mistake disappear? How much decision-making happens under pressure? How much time exists between the problem and the penalty? Those questions tell you more about someone's real financial life than salary ever will. And that leads to the uncomfortable truth. A lot of people are not living inside a low-income problem first. They are living inside a low-margin problem. Their paycheck may be technically enough, but there is no space inside it. No space for delay, no space for comparison, no space for a bad week, no space for recovery, no space for being human. That is why the first real financial upgrade is not always a higher salary. Sometimes the first real upgrade is simply creating enough room for the same salary to behave differently. A cheaper fixed cost, a shorter commute, a debt payment that finally disappears, a bill schedule that stops stacking all at once, a small buffer that keeps one mistake from becoming three. That kind of change does not always look impressive from the outside, but it can completely alter the emotional experience of money. And the emotional experience of money matters more than most people admit. Because once your month stops feeling fragile, your decisions improve. Once your decisions improve, emergencies cost less. Once emergencies cost less, recovery gets faster. Once recovery gets faster, the same salary starts acting bigger. That is the irony. People think a bigger income automatically creates a better life. Sometimes what really changes a life is not more income, but less pressure attached to the income you already have. So, if you have ever looked around and wondered how someone making about what you make seems to be living in a different universe, the answer may not be that they are smarter, stronger, or more disciplined. The answer may be much less flattering and much more useful. They may simply be living inside a lighter structure. And if your life has felt harder than your paycheck should make it feel, that does not always mean you are failing. It may mean your salary is carrying a version of life that is heavier than it looks. People love to compare income because it is visible. But financial life is not built on visible numbers. It is built on pressure, timing, recovery, and room. That is why two people can earn the same amount and still end up in different lives. Because the paycheck is the same, the conditions are not.